If you've ever had to fill a Word document with charts or tables or numbers that you've calculated with R, then you know how tedious it can be to export all of that stuff from R to some file and then stick that into your Word document. Luckily, with the Officer package, you can automate these steps and create the Word file right from within R. So today I'm going to show you how to create a Word file from within R from scratch. And then once we've learned that, I'll also show you how you can take any Word template that you or your company might have and fill in the data using placeholders that you have in that document. And in case you don't know me, my name is Albert Rapp. I am a mathematician and data scientist, and on this channel, I help our users with typical data science tasks like creating automated reports. Alright, let's build a Word file from scratch. Let's just load the tidyverse and the Officer package, and then once that is done, we can use the read docx function. And once we execute this, we do see here that we get an empty document. It says here it's an r.docx document with one element, and then you see a whole bunch of styles, and then you see a remark that this document is empty right now. So let us fill this document with some text. For that, I'm going to create a new code chunk, and in there I'm just going to throw in a little bit of code that creates a timestamp for me. So if I look at my variable current date now, I do see here that's the date. And if I look at my variable current time, I see here that I've just assembled the timestamp as a text. And now with the glue function from the glue package, I can use these variables as part of a text. For example, I can write something like this file was created with R on, and then I use my current date variable as a placeholder, and then I finish the sentence with at the current time. So if I throw this in here, via dot at the end, then I do see here that my text was rendered, and I do want to use this inside of my Word document now. For that, I will just take this text here and stick this into the ftext function. This ftext function is something that comes from the Officer package, and it's the thing that will generate the text inside of the Word document for us. So let's save this into a variable. Let's call it text creation time. And now if we look at this, we do see here now that it has some weird output. It shows you the text as well as the format, but for now this shouldn't bother us at all. Really what we need to do now is to wrap this thing into a paragraph. And for that there's the fpar function, and in there we can stick in the text creation time text. So that way we do see here now that we get a whole lot of information on the chunks that are inside of this paragraphs, where a chunk consists out of the paragraphs we've just defined. And then there's a whole lot of settings on the paragraph properties and the text properties. So just like we've named this ftext content here, let's do the same thing for the paragraph, but instead we'll name this par creation time. So with that, we do have a paragraph that contains a timestamp of when we want to have created that file. So all we have to do now is to create an empty document again. And with that, we can pass this to the body add fpar function. And in there, we can use the paragraph here to throw this into the document. And the moment we do that, you do see here that we do have some content at our current cursor location. For now, you don't have to worry about what the cursor location is. I'll explain that in due time. But for now, you do see here that we don't display an empty document anymore. And now to get this content from R into a Word file, all we have to do is to pass our current document to the print function and specify the target document. So if we execute this now, we do see here that we don't get any response in the console. But if we look at the files, we do see here now that we have a docx document inside of the directory where I've saved it in. Or rather, we have it in the file that I've saved it in. And if I open this file now in a document reader, I don't use Word right now because I'm not on Windows right now. But if I open this in a similar document viewer, then you can see here now that in my docx file, there is the text, the timestamp in there now. So that's nice, but it's pretty boring. So let's throw in a little bit of style on top of that. To do so, all we have to do is to go into this fpar function where we specified the paragraph. And if we look into the documentation, we see here that there is this fp_p and fp_t argument, which corresponds to the paragraph formatting properties and the text formatting properties. So let's start to specify the text properties. For that, we stick into the fp_t argument, the fptext function, which has a whole lot of argument that allow us to set text properties. Here I just want to make the color into Doja Blue 4 and I want to make the text larger. Similarly, I can do the exact same thing with the properties for the paragraph where I use the fp par function. Just like the fp text function, the fp par function is a helper function that has a whole bunch of arguments that correspond to different styles you may want to set. It can be something as simple as text alignment. Let's just copy this part here and make this into right text alignment. Or we could set a border where we notice that borders are set with another helper function called fp_border. And if we want to be really specific, we can even set the border for a specific direction. So let's just take this part here, throw this in there, but let's use it on the border top argument to specify the border that is on top of the paragraph. And inside of this argument, we can once again specify things that correspond to the properties of the border. And here I want to specify the color and the width. So for the width, let's just go with 2. And for the color, let's just use the same color that we have specified here. So if we stick this in here, let's just make some room. Now we have redefined our paragraph. And if we look at this variable here, we do see here now that the changes, for example, on the border are inside of the document now. So technically, all we have to do is to re-execute this whole code chunk to re-render our document. So let's just do that. And now if we do that, we do see here now that the border has the correct color and the correct line width, but the text, it should also have the same color and it didn't change. This can happen if some default properties override the properties we've specified. In this case, this means that we have specified the text properties for the paragraph, but the default text property for the f text might override what we specified here. So let's just take out this part here because it didn't help us. And then before we define the text, let's just throw this in here. Let's get the alignment right. And then let's define this as the property blue text. And here we just specify, maybe you also want to have bold text. So let's set bold to true. So now that we have this variable here, we look at it, you can see it's just a list of the properties. Now that we have that, we can look into the ftext function and see here that we can stick in the properties via the prop argument. So let's just take our variable here and stick this in there. And the reason why I have put this into a separate variable is because that way we can reuse the style if we need to. So with that, we have specified the properties for the text right there where we define the text. And with that, we should now have the same text color as the border color. So let's re-execute all of our code and then we can check if that's truly the case. And as you can see, it worked out nicely. We do see here now that the text color and the border color, they are now consistent. And with that, we have achieved exactly what we wanted to do. I don't know about you, but that's a huge win in my book. So now we have understood how to set properties like colors, font size, boldness, and so on for parts of our document. But we don't even necessarily have to specify the colors and boldness and so on for the whole paragraph. We can also do that for one word at a time. And to demonstrate that, let me remove this part here and redefine our paragraph. So just like before, we can define our paragraph using the fpar function, and then we just throw in a couple of f text in there. So we just throw in the first part of the sentence, then we throw in the variable that we want to use, and there we specify the properties that we want to use, and then we do the same thing for the rest of the sentence. And then, just like before, we can still leave the paragraph properties like the border and the text alignment as we've had before. And now we can see that we do have the text back in there, but we can also see that we have really fine-grained control over how we want to style each word in our text. So that was exciting. Now let's do something even more interesting. Let's try to throw in a table into our document. So let's create a new code chunk and we can use the code that we've used before as a template, but we can throw other stuff on top of that. For starters, we can throw in another paragraph using the fpar function and the ftext function that says something like, and now we will add a table of the famous iris data set in here, but only the first 10 rows. And we specify some properties that give us a bit of room on top and below this new paragraph. And with that, we have another paragraph inside of our document. As you can see here now, the text is in there and we can add a table below that. And the way to do that is pretty much the same as the way to add a paragraph, but this time instead of using body add fpar, we use something called body add table. It's as simple as that. So as I've said, we use this new function and we specify that we want to use head iris, which is just a data set that I have. It's the famous iris data set and it's the first 10 rows of that. This variable iris, in case you don't know, in case you've never seen it, it's just integrated into R. So this is why this data set loads without a problem, even though I've never specified it. And now if I execute this, we do see here that everything went smoothly. And if we look into our document, we do see here now that there is a table in there. But this is not a particularly nice table, so this is why you could use one of the table styles that is defined inside of each R.docx document to make this a little bit nicer. For that, you could check out one of the many styles that you see in the console, and somewhere around here you'll see that there is a table template. So we could, as the style, set this table template and see if this looks maybe a little bit nicer. And indeed, this looks a bit nicer as it gives you more horizontal lines and it makes the column names bold, which I think is a nicer look. So what you could do is try to figure out how to set a specific table style using other functions from the Officer package. But really a different approach that I would suggest is not using these table styles, but instead using the flex table package to generate the table yourself. So back in our code, what we could do in our code chunk is to make some room and then load the flex table package. And once you do that, you have the flex table function available to you. So this means you can take the head iris dataset, so basically these 10 rows that we've just seen, and pass that to the flex table function. And with that, you do have a nice table, and you could also pass this to AutoFit to make the column width fit nicely with the content. Of course, the flex table package is incredibly powerful and it allows you to put in a whole bunch of customization. But here I just want to show you the principle of how you can use flex tables to get that into a Word document. What you have to do is to just save this into a variable. And then instead of using body add table, you can just use body add flex table. And then you just use, instead of the data and the style, you just use the table that you have saved. And now if you re-execute this, you'll see that you now have the flex table style inside of your document. So all of that is pretty cool, wouldn't you say? And we're making great progress, but I do want to show you one more thing before we start to talk about how to replace placeholders and templates. You see, what I want to show you is how to add a ggplot to a Word document. So let's create a new code chunk and then let me throw in a bit of code that creates a ggplot. Nothing too fancy. And I'm not going over this in detail, it's just a ggplot of variables from the Penguins dataset from the Pama Penguins package. And now what you could do is take this part here, throw this into the code chunk, and then after we've added the table, we can also add another paragraph with some text. And then just like we've added a table with body add table or body add flex table, there's a specific function for ggplots, namely body add gg. And in there, you just have to specify the ggplot and then things like width and height. And once you've done that, you can rerun everything. And now you also have a chart inside of your Word document. Sweet, with that we have learned how to add stuff into a Word document. Here we have done everything from scratch so that we could focus on just the mechanics of getting things into a Word document using the Officer package. But of course, you rarely want to build a whole Word document from scratch using R, because after all, there is already a Word file probably that you need to use as a template. So why not take this Word document and then just stick in a couple of placeholders. And once you have these placeholders, you can just replace them with R, and that's much easier than to build everything from scratch. And to show you how that works, I've brought you a template that I've downloaded from some Microsoft Office template directory or some template website where a whole bunch of templates were listed. And here I've just taken a template for a letter and filled this with some generic text. And every now and then I have left some words in all caps or even in brackets to indicate that I do want to replace these things later on. And as you can see here, there is even a placeholder for a company logo, so I will also show you how to get an image in there. But the main point here is that you can use anything that Word gives you, even if it's some really fancy, elaborate style, and just throw in the data that you have from R using the Officer package. So let's do that next. So let's first create a new code chunk, and then let's use the read the readdocx function once again, and let us load in the letter.docx document, which is the name of the template that I have. And in here, just like before, you see a whole bunch of styles. This time there are even more styles defined because this template has a lot of them, but fundamentally it's nothing different than what we have seen before. It is still, if you scroll all the way to the top, in our docx document. Now what you can do with this is you can just stick it into the body replace all text function where you can specify old values and the new values. So in the old value, you can stick in one of your placeholders. And one of the placeholders I did stick into the document was a date placeholder. And for the new value, you can just use the timestamp and recalculate it if you want. And then you can once again throw this into a document. Let's just call this replacement here. So now if we execute this and check out the document, we'll see that this doesn't exactly look like what we want. You see, I originally wanted to replace the date here with just the date, but for some reason the date was put into a whole bunch of weird places. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Namely, the thing that you stick into the old value argument is a regular expression, and in regular expression, these brackets here, they do have a special meaning, and if you want to strip that bracket of its special meaning, you have to put in 2 backslashes in front of that to tell the regular expressions these are really just brackets. And now if you re-execute this, everything should look pretty normal. And yep, it looks exactly like we want. Every other placeholder was left as is, but the date thing was replaced. Now what I want to do next is to replace this company logo placeholder with an actual company logo. And for that I've brought you a company logo that looks like this. It's a fake company logo that I've just generated with Claude AI. But the point is we want to get this image now into the thing where the placeholder right now is. Unfortunately, this is not as easy as just using some replace function. There is only this replace function for text with text and not for text with image. But there is still something we can do. And this is exactly where these cursors come in. You see, if you re-execute just this part before printing it, you always see that you have specific content at the cursor location. This is some fictitious cursor and you can move it to some other place. For example, you could move it to where the company logo placeholder is at and then delete the paragraph of the cursor and stick in the image right at the position where the cursor is currently at. And because I know that this sounds kind of strange, let me just show you how that works. The way to move a cursor is to just pass your document into one of the cursor functions. There's cursor backward, begin, bookmarks, and forward, and so on. But here what we need is the reach function, because this function allows you to move your cursor to where you reach a specific keyword. And the specific keyword could be the company logo placeholder. So let's just use this and use company logo in here. Notice that I don't use the brackets here because I will move to the paragraph where the cursor is at anyway. The thing is, you can't replace separate things. You always have to replace whole paragraphs, so you don't need to be very specific about what you throw in here. You can just make sure that the right paragraph will be found. And if you execute just this part, you do see here now that the content at cursor location changed. And you do see here now that we have different content there. So with that, we can now remove this thing with body remove. And if we execute just this part, ignoring the other stuff for now, then we do see now that our cursor is now at the date placeholder. Remember, the date placeholder replacement happens later, so this is why this placeholder is still in there. And after removing the paragraph that has the company logo, we are left with the fact that the cursor now is at the next paragraph, which is just the date placeholder paragraph. So now we can pass this to the body add image function, and in there you have to specify a couple of arguments related to the image, namely, well, what's the image source, what's the width, what's the height, but crucially you also need to specify the position of where to place the image related to your cursor. Right now my cursor is at the date paragraph and I want to have my image before that, so this is why I set the position to before. And now if we execute this, we once again see that the content at the cursor location has changed, and here a paragraph was added that will contain the image. So to put everything back together, let's just throw this to the body replacement function again. And if we re-execute everything now, we can have a look at our document once again. And in here, we now see that our image is in there, but it is not really right aligned like we want. So we do need to make a couple of changes. But we've already seen that the image is added as part of a paragraph, which means that we just need to modify the alignment in the paragraph that is used, and then everything should work out. Luckily for us, the body add image function also has an argument for style, where we can put in a paragraph style. Unfortunately for us, this argument requires a text that is available inside of the styles that this document has. But I don't want to figure out which paragraph style here contains only right-aligned stuff and not some other weird formatting. So the easiest option is to just define my own style and throw that into the document. So that's why after reading in my document, I will use the docx that paragraph style argument to define my own paragraph style. And the way this function works is really simple. You just define an ID for the style, the name for the style, and then you just throw in the paragraph styles using the fppar function that we have learned about earlier. And since this chain here is getting pretty long, let me just split this up into separate variables. So here, let's just call this doc template, and then we can just do this stuff here. Right now, nothing has changed other than we have thrown a new paragraph style into the available styles inside of our docx argument. Now the only thing that's left to do is to specify that the style argument should be equal to the name of the style that we have defined. And now if we re-execute this and open our document, we'll see now that our image is right aligned. So that worked pretty smoothly, but we do also see here that our date kind of moved up and we want to have more spacing. So that's why we will also modify the paragraph style here to have more padding at the bottom. So let's just go into our styles here, make some room, and then let's just add a padding bottom of 100 in there. And now if we re-execute this, we should have more space. And if we look into the document, this is indeed the case because the date has moved downwards. Sweet, with that we have already learned a couple of complicated things, and I do want to show you one more thing, namely that the styles of the text, when you replace them with something else, it remains the same, which is pretty great because that way you don't have to figure out how to re-implement a style after replacement. You can just make sure that your template file uses a specific style that you need, and then you just worry about the text replacement in R. And because this is pretty much the same as we have already learned about, let me just throw in the code for all of the separate replacements here. So for all of the placeholders, I have thrown in something that replaces the placeholder. And now if we re-execute everything, then we do see here now that the placeholder were indeed replaced, and the styles like the color or the boldness, it is all left as is. So that's all great, but what about adding more ggplots or tables or some other images? Well, we've already learned about how to do that when we inserted the image. The structure is always the same, but to reiterate what you need to do, especially because this cursor thing is a little bit tricky, let me show you one more example. Let's just throw in a ggplot between this sentence here and the closing stuff. For that, we can just go into our code here. This became pretty long already, but we are adding just one more thing, so we don't need to break it out into separate parts here. In any case, we'll use the same trick as before, namely we want to move the cursor to a specific location. And here I want to go to where the warm regards message is. And now if I execute just this part before printing, I do see here now that I got an error because company logo hasn't been found. And this is something, it's actually kind of great that this happened to me because this is something you have to take into account. Once something is replaced, you cannot find it anymore. And since I've executed this code here without reloading the document template, this thing that cursor reaches trying to find company logo cannot be found anymore. You see earlier when we executed this whole code chunk, we were loading in the document, set a paragraph style, and then we were replacing stuff. But if we print this to file or not, it doesn't matter. This variable that contains the document, it will always account for the changes. So the moment you have removed company logo once, it is not in this variable doc template anymore. If you want to have the original template back in the document, you will have to also load the document itself back in. So if we execute this now and now execute this part here, it says warm regards has not been found. And the reason for that is because warm regards here is spelled with a capital letter. So that's why if we put a capital letter into this word here now and reload the original template and then re-execute this part here, we do see now that our cursor has moved to that paragraph again. And now, just like we've learned earlier, we can use the body add gg function to add ggplots to our document. The important part here now is that once again we have to specify the position relative to our cursor, and right now the cursor is already past the location where we want to have the image, so that's why we say put the ggplot before the position of the cursor. And then we can just take the rest of the ggplot adding code from before and stick this in here. And now we throw this to the print function again, and if we re-execute this whole code chunk, and if we open up our document, we'll see that, yeah, we have a ggplot inside of our letter now. And with that, I've also shown you a whole bunch of tricks of how you can work with Word documents from within R. If you enjoyed this video and you need to do things like this more often where you have to assemble text using R, then I am sure that my data cleaning masterclass will help you, because one part of the 5 parts inside of that video course specifically deal with text cleaning and working with text from within R. And I think if you have to do tasks like this more often, then the techniques that I show you there are invaluable and you'll really enjoy it. And if you want to check out some of my other videos, then feel free to check out this playlist here. And with that, let me say thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.